Tensions between the U.S. and Israel run high as President Biden pauses a major weapons delivery to pressure Prime Minister Netanyahu not to invade Rafah.
Our neighbor is gone. The rocket hit and I just saw dust around me.
Protests across college campuses face their strongest challenges yet. And our Palestinian colleague on the ground describes covering the war and surviving it.
This bloody war must end. Must end because of our kids and their kids. For a good future for them.
This is PBS News Weekly. I'm Nick Schifrin. The Biden administration suspended the delivery of thousands of bombs to Israel this week, a rare move by a White House that has said its commitment to Israel is, quote, ironclad. The decision was made last week but made public this week as Israel took steps to invade the southern Gaza city of Rafah. Already, Israeli troops took over the Rafah border crossing, and Netanyahu vowed more was to come.
Seizing the passage in Rafah today is a very important step, an important step on the way to destroying the remaining military capabilities of Hamas, including the elimination of the 4 terrorist battalions in Rafah, and an important step to damage the governmental capabilities of Hamas. Because as of this morning, we denied Hamas a passage that was essential for establishing its reign of terror in the Strip.
In a CNN interview, President Biden defended his decision to pause the shipments of some bombs.
Civilians have been killed in Gaza as a consequence of those bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers. And I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem.
I spoke to Amna Nawaz about the latest.
Let's just start with what exactly the administration has suspended here.
The administration froze the shipment of 3,500 American bombs to Israel. These are weapons that were already congressionally approved, specifically 1,800 2,000-pound bombs, which Israel has used mostly in northern Gaza. You see the aftermath of one right there to target Hamas tunnels deep underground. But these are the bombs that have caused the most civilian casualties because of their size and because they are unguided. A senior administration official says, quote, we are especially focused on the end use of the 2,000-pound bombs and the impact they could have in dense urban settings. That is a reference to Rafah, where, of course, 1.2 million Gazans have fled in southern Gaza, and Israel is threatening to assault, as you were saying before, especially Rafah city. Now, Israel has more than enough weapons, Amna, to be able to assault Rafah. So this is not about readiness. This is what one official tells me is a message, and that message is being sent also because the U.S. is saying if Israel does not go into Rafah, then there will not be further frozen shipments. Not only those 3,500 bombs that we talked about already, but a separate shipment of Joint Direct Attack Munitions, or JDAMs. These are kits that turn unguided munitions into precision-guided munitions that Israel is also asking for. But U.S. is not blocking any defensive weapons. That includes missile defense, nor is it blocking recent appropriated foreign financial money for Israeli weapons. In total, the U.S. has sent Israel billions of dollars since October the 7th, but it's a major step for President Biden, who's criticized this idea in the past. The fact is that this is the largest leverage that the U.S. has over Israel, the weapons.
A major step. So what's been the response, both here at home and overseas?
The Democrats who have called for the U.S. to use this leverage hailed this idea, but Republicans criticized it. The chairs of the House Foreign Affairs and Armed Services Committee said they were, quote, appalled by the decision, and they said it weakens deterrence against Iran and Lebanese Hezbollah. And a source briefed on the details tells me that, quote, Israeli officials expressed deep frustration at the delay of the shipment and the U.S. briefings to the media on the matter, raising concerns that the move may jeopardize the hostage deal negotiations at a critical moment. And that's what makes this moment so critical. CIA Director Bill Burns is in the middle of trying to convince the Israelis to accept a hostage deal as Israel threatens this week to go into Rafah if there is no hostage deal, and the president is faced with this major decision of whether to withhold weapons. All of these three major points are intertwined, and they have major ramifications not only for the war, but the future of the U.S.-Israel relationship.
Critical point indeed. Nick Schifrin, thank you, as always, for your reporting.
Thank you. At least 97 journalists and media workers have been killed in Gaza, Israel, and Lebanon since the start of the war, making this by far the deadliest conflict for reporters in recent memory. Our own journalist in Gaza, cameraman and producer Shams Odeh, has been documenting the conflict since the October 7th terrorist attacks. But for Shams, as with so many others, he is covering the war and trying to survive it. Gaza today is defined by destruction, death, and displacement. And Gaza producer and cameraman Shams Odeh has documented and experienced all three.
There is a lot of people killed here in this place in Rafah. This is my tent, my bed, and my kitchen.
Today, this is his canvas home, where the war forced him and his family to flee in December. They live underneath the constant sound of Israeli drones in Emirati tents, part of a tent city in Deir al-Balah, one of tens of thousands of displaced families finding a way to live. 4-year-old Kareem leads a gaggle of grandchildren. The youngest, 1-year-old Rose, sleeps with a prized possession. Their mother, Diana, is Shams's eldest child.
My message to the world is we are humans, we are not numbers. We deserve to live a better life such any person in the world. So we all here evacuated our homes.
In November, even after an initial displacement, they had a real roof over their heads near Nusrat. A madhouse of extended cousins lived in a house that Shams built himself, with Benjamin Netanyahu's televised speeches and Diana Odeh's deferred dreams.
We here in Gaza suffer that we need our children to have a better future. I want my kid Kareem to be a doctor in the future, but we don't know if we are gonna make it till the morning.
But the children now know things they should never have to know.
My son Kareem even knows if this bomb if this bomb is dangerous or not. He tells me, "Mom, it's far away, it's not beside us."
But one day it was beside them, and Shams's house is now reduced to rubble, where grandkids once played, debris, and devastation.
I choose to live here far away from troubles, far away from militant places. I choose this place to live in peace, me and my kids.
This house was his life's work, his family's safe haven.
My dream was that everyone, Israelis, Palestinians, live near each other with peace, with love. And this bloody war must end because of our kids and their kids, for a good future for them. We must teach them how to love each other.
Love might feel most lost in Khan Yunis, once home to 500,000 people, where today houses are flattened like pancakes and apartment blocks are cut into carcasses, including one more Odeh family home.
This is the last home that my family owned in all Gaza Strip. After destroying my apartment in Gaza, then my house in Nusayrat camp.
The Israeli military says it does not target journalists and blames Hamas for the death of Gaza's civilians.
Hamas places its weapons, its terrorists, in hospitals, schools, mosques, and throughout civilian areas. They do this in order to win immunity and to maximize civilian casualties.
As for Shams, he will keep working and trying to protect his family.
They are a refugee like me.
Including the newest members. But he couldn't protect everyone.
They were playing here, spend their life here.
31 of his extended family have been killed.
This is Shams Odeh. Journalist Shams Odeh spent his life as a peaceful person, but this is what happened to me. Hardly we can find food, hardly we can have money, but this will not stop our hope. We love you all, and I will keep loving you all.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin. Amid the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the Biden administration is considering options to allow some Palestinians to seek refuge in the U.S. Laura Barone-Lopez has the latest.
As we follow the war in Gaza, and Gazans tell us they feel there is no safe space there, the administration is considering some new measures related to this. Tell us about that.
That's right. 3 sources familiar with the administration's thinking told me that the White House is considering allowing certain Palestinians with U.S. ties refugee status. That would be Palestinians that have family members that are either U.S. citizens or have permanent resident status. Now, Amna, it's important to say that this is in the very early stages of consideration, and it was something that was first reported by CBS News, but we've confirmed it.
It's, to be clear here, it's not something they've officially announced yet from the White House, right?
That's right. So the White House officially has just said from the podium that they're constantly evaluating policy proposals that would further support Palestinians who have U.S. family members that are citizens and who may want to join them in the United States, but that they have nothing to announce on this front at this moment. Something else that a White House aide told me is that since the start of the Israel-Hamas war, the U.S. has helped more than 1,800 American citizens and their families leave Gaza and come to the United States. They've also helped some children who need dire medical care get care at hospitals in the region.
I know you've been looking into this more deeply too. What obstacles stand in their way if they were to move forward with something like this, and where does it fit into the larger administration efforts on refugees?
I spoke to Krish O'Mara Vignaraja, who's the president of Global Refuge. That's a refugee resettlement organization, Amna, and she said that the biggest obstacles she thinks to carrying out a plan like this would be more political than they are logistical.
I think it's important to understand that program applicants who come through the refugee resettlement program are some of the most extremely vetted of any immigrants seeking to come to the U.S. This is a program that has a long-standing history. It has had bipartisan support. And unfortunately, the fear-mongering that we are seeing today resembles what we saw in 2015 when it came to Syrian refugees, which we saw was thoroughly unfounded and unnecessary.
Now, Vignaraja said that what's important distinction here is that if Palestinians are allowed in through the refugee program, that could take years, Amna. It's not something that is quick. It would allow them, though, some type of more permanent protected status in the U.S. versus humanitarian parole, which is what we've seen the administration use and allow Afghans and Ukrainians use that program to come to the United States, those that are fleeing conflicts. And humanitarian parole is a faster process, but it only allows for temporary protected status in the United States. So they could very well end up considering humanitarian parole as something that would be much more expeditious for allowing Palestinians in. Another point on this, though, is that it would require close coordination with Egypt. And of course, there are some fears amongst Egyptian officials, Vignaraja said, as well as amongst Palestinians, that if they were to ultimately evacuate, if more were to evacuate Gaza, that they may not be let back in by the Israeli government.
And we know when news of this proposal came out, former President Trump did attack it. Walk us through the policy differences on here. What do we know about how he approaches this versus how President Biden approaches it?
There's a stark contrast here between former President Trump and President Biden. And during a recent campaign rally, Trump demonized Palestinian refugees.
Your towns and villages will now be accepting people from Gaza, lots of people from Gaza, because under chain migration, they can bring everybody they ever touched. Under no circumstances shall we bring thousands of refugees from Hamas-controlled terrorist epicenters like Gaza to America. We just can't do it.
As you heard there, Amna, the former president has vowed to ban Gazan refugees, would not allow them to come in if they do want to. He's also vowed to reinstate the Muslim ban, and he's proposed ideological screenings for immigrants. I think it's also important to point out a key distinction between Trump and President Biden when it comes to the matter of resettlement of refugees as a whole, Amna. Under Trump, he cut the refugee resettlement cap to a record low during his last year to 15,000 in his final year in office, and ended up admitting even less than 15,000. And then by contrast, President Biden, when he came in, raised the refugee cap to roughly 62,000 during his first year, and now the target is 125,000. So overall, President Biden has tried to rebuild the refugee resettlement program.
All right, our White House correspondent Laura Barone-Lopez. Laura, thank you.
Thank you.
Over the last week, NewsHour producers visited campuses across the country, talking to students about why they're protesting, the language that they've been using, and whether there should be limits on free speech. Stephanie Tsai has our report. She began at George Washington University, which was cleared by Washington, D.C. police after our interviews were conducted.
For nearly 2 weeks on George Washington University's campus, more than 100 tents stretched across the lawn, part of a demonstration by students from around the D.C. area.
Gaza, that's why we're here. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And I think a lot of students, after October 7th, have been just feeling this frustration, and they've been feeling kind of this disgust with the world around them.
20-year-old Palestinian American sophomore Selina El-Shihabi says she has lost family members in the conflict. She's here because of the high death toll in Gaza, now at more than 34,000 according to the Gaza Health Ministry, and U.S. military support for Israel.
A lot of us, we've been taught that the freedom of speech, the right to life, the right to liberty, the right to pursuit of happiness, that water, food are basic rights that everyone should have. And seeing the United States endorse this is just actually outrageous.
But the rhetoric that has surrounded the protests has made some students fearful. Sabrina Sofer and Skylar Saratsky are seniors at George Washington and are both Jewish.
Over the past week or so, and since this whole war even started, and since October 7th, even the day after, I felt that as a Jewish student, I have felt unwelcome in my classes and on this campus.
Even before the October 7th terror attacks, anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. were on the rise, increasing by more than 35% in 2022 alone.
My parents are extremely concerned for my safety and well-being. My mom was asking me if I could go on the campus as little as possible, don't go near the encampment.
Sabrina is Israeli American, and most of Skylar's extended family lives in Israel.
And without Israel, my family would have been a part of the 6 million that we lost during the Holocaust. Without Israel, it means that I wouldn't be here today, that my peers wouldn't be here today.
And they say the signs they see around campus go far beyond protesting a war or the policies of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, known as Bibi.
I think you can absolutely critique Israel's politics. You can critique Bibi and his government, as I do with my friends and my family, and that's not anti-Semitic. It becomes anti-Semitic when you start criticizing the state of Israel's existence.
The sentiment that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism is far detached from reality. And it is these so-called moral high ground causes that are far removed from the history of the Jewish people.
Zionism, genocide, from the river to the sea. These are among the terms fueling the conflict over the conflict, playing out across the country and most visibly on college campuses.
How many kids did you kill today? How many kids did you kill today?
Each is in a political moment, each feels somewhat threatened, and each is staking out a maximalist position.
These differing viewpoints, though not new, have only intensified in the aftermath of Hamas's October 7th terror attacks and Israel's military response, says Kenneth Stern, the director of the Bard Center for the Study of Hate.
This is such a fraught subject where there are two sort of national identity stories that are in direct conflict with each other, and people subscribe, to one or the other, and really don't see the nuance.
Many students across the country say they are simply protesting an ideology.
Our fight has been against Zionism, has been against an Israeli government. It has never been against a religion.
University of Minnesota senior Omar Ali was at his school's encampment last week.
We are calling for a free Palestine, so it's free of settlers, not free of one religion or the other. We want Palestinian Muslims, Palestinian Christians, Palestinian Jews to live in one place.
No justice, no peace.
At George Washington University, Jewish student Miriam is also anti-Zionist. She asked us not to use her last name for fear of retribution.
I know that my Jewish identity for me has no ties to a nation state. That's not something that I feel is important to me, especially a nation state that has been occupying Palestinian land for 76 years. So I think decolonizing sort of the Jewish identity means separating Zionism from Judaism and therefore separating anti-Zionism from anti-Semitism.
But to many Jews, anti-Zionist sentiments are a direct threat to the existence of a Jewish state and are intrinsically anti-Semitic and threatening. Ethan Fine is a Jewish senior at the University of Minnesota.
When you seek to preserve the right to self-determination for everybody except for the Jewish people, that is anti-Semitic, that is anti-Jewish rhetoric, and that is where anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism become very close.
At colleges across the country, one phrase in particular is a lightning rod. Pro-Palestinian protesters have been chanting this. The refrain reflects deeply held beliefs over who should control the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, where the nation of Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories sit.
What we are calling for is a one-state solution where Israelis and Palestinians and Jews and Muslims can live in coexistence.
In 1977, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's own party used the same phrase in its original platform. And today, he says Israel should have security control over the entire area.
It's ironic that a lot of Israeli critics claim that that's problematic. They call for a Jewish state from the river to the sea. And so that's just extremely contradictory.
Hamas, which has called for the destruction of Israel, added the phrase from the river to the sea to its charter in 2017. And pro-Israel groups, including the Anti-Defamation League, have labeled the phrase anti-Semitic.
Slogans like, there is only one solution, Intifada revolution. Slogans like, from the river to the sea, Palestine will all be free, are inevitably heard as endorsements of violence, because the most prominent act of so-called resistance being valorized at many of the same rallies was explicitly, at least for some of the leadership of Hamas and some of the perpetrators, about murdering Israeli Jews.
Ethan Katz, a historian at the University of California at Berkeley, acknowledges the diverse meanings of the phrase, but says it has particular charge after the October 7th terror attack on Israel, when Hamas killed some 1,200 people. Some pro-Israel supporters say any endorsement of resistance against Israel is an implicit support for Hamas. None of the pro-Palestinian students NewsHour interviewed expressed support for Hamas's actions on October 7th, but some student groups have lauded the attack.
We know the horrific details. We know what a brutal attack this was, in huge parts of it, on civilians in horrific ways, while being described as an act of resistance, as an act of liberation, both by its perpetrators and by many activists.
The rhetoric being used at these protests is not that of a peaceful, conclusion to this war. It's that of violence.
I think it's important to keep in mind that the protest is against a system of oppression and not against a group of people. And we have to be very clear about the importance of keeping those things separate.
Maha Nasser is a historian at the University of Arizona.
For the vast majority of the protesters who are using this chant, it is a call for freedom for everyone who lives between the river and the sea.
Ezra Kay, a Jewish student at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, says how words are spoken matters.
Saying things like the classic from the river to the sea get construed as anti-Semitic. It all comes down to the context of what's happening, who's doing it, and at what time.
Another fiercely contested term is genocide. Some, like Samantha Ginsburg, a Jewish senior at The Ohio State University, says Israel's actions in Gaza don't meet the threshold for the charge.
Genocide is a really serious accusation, and it does not deserve to be watered down and simplified and just applied to everything. That's a genocide. It's not. It requires intent. There is no intent to wipe out the Palestinian people.
According to a January YouGov Economist poll, 49% of young adults under the age of 30 do believe Israel is committing a genocide.
Even though no one has been convicted with genocide yet, it's starting to look and feel a lot like genocide. So whether you want to call it or not, we can see that something is happening that looks and feels a lot like it.
The ability to navigate both of those narratives simultaneously is really what's at the heart of this, and the difficulty of many students, because they pick one and they ignore the other when really both should be engaged.
As each side becomes more entrenched, Stern from the Bard Center for the Study of Hate says some university officials are struggling with how to navigate this conflict.
The obligation on campus is to keep students safe physically and from harassment and from true threats, but not safe from ideas. Students should not expect that they're not going to hear things that are disturbing. They should be expecting to have the scholars and administrators and others help them unpack that and learn from it. And they should have the intellectual curiosity to figure out why somebody has a different point of view.
In order to move forward, he says students should focus on areas of common understanding.
Where can you agree? You could agree what we're seeing is awful. Whether you want to technically call it genocide or not, where can we agree on things? And underscoring that, I think, is a way forward for students.
Palestine will be free.
It's unclear whether students can reconcile the warring narratives as protests continue on campuses from coast to coast. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Tsai.
When do we want it?
And that's it for this episode of PBS News Weekly. For all of us, thanks so much for watching.